All right, here's a story from Timcast.com. Supreme Court finds affirmative action unconstitutional, says school cannot consider race during admission. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote Harvard and UNC concluded wrongly that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. The court ruled universities and colleges cannot weigh an applicant's race during the admissions process. The majority of the justices found affirmative action policies unavoidably employ race in a negative manner, involve racial stereotyping, and lack meaningful endpoints. We have never permitted admissions programs to work in that way, and we will not do so today, stated the court. 2 appeals regarding the constitutionality of affirmative action have been appealed to the Supreme Court. One brought by the University of North Carolina was blocked 6-3, and one brought by Harvard University was rejected 6-2. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson did not vote on the latter. The ruling released on June 29th overturns a previous decision made in the Grutter v. Bollinger in 2003. At the time, the Supreme Court found that race could be weighed as a factor in admissions because universities had a compelling interest in maintaining diverse campuses. The Supreme Court is right. What you need to understand very, very simply is that in order for affirmative action to work, the assumption must be that certain races are inherently worse than other races, which is just not true. At least I don't believe our government should be operating that. I don't believe it, but I think the left absolutely does. I'm seeing a bunch of tweets from people on the left. The racism pouring out of these liberals' brains is insane. These people are tweeting things about like, well, how will minorities succeed now? Hard work and
yeah,
what do you mean? I don't know.
The same way
like,
they always succeeded.
The same way so many other immigrants who have come to this country have succeeded by working really hard and making a better future for their children. It's amazing, isn't it?
Well, it's incredibly infantilizing. I've talked about affirmative action in the past. I've even done an educational video about it. And one thing I want to mention is, well, the obvious clear injustice with affirmative action and the thing conservatives should talk about most loudly is not the soft bigotry of low expectation, but the fact that white students and Asian students are kept from having positions that they have merited because students who didn't merit those positions were given them on the basis of their ethnic makeup. It is also true that these policies are not good for minorities or people in these communities. So what will happen, and this is something Thomas Sowell's talked about, this is something we did a research video on for Freedom Tunes a while back. What happens is a black student will end up being placed in a classroom and in a school setting that is beyond his academic qualifications. And so he'll end up dropping out more often because he isn't in a classroom that actually matches what his standardized testing scores tell us he's going to be capable of achieving academically. So for example, if you have a black kid who could get into a really impressive school, but not necessarily Harvard, and then affirmative action bumps him up and puts him into Harvard, the likelihood that he's going to drop out of Harvard is greater than the likelihood that he would have dropped out of the institution that he was more qualified to attend, and then he's less likely to get a degree. So it's,
but to clarify, while you are correct in the context of this, they're targeting minorities. What you're saying applies to literally any person of any race. If you take any person of any race who scores low on an entrance exam and then put them in a more advanced program, they're likely to drop from that program. And so what these programs were doing was one, basing the entire admission structure on the idea that certain races just inherently, and I mean it when I say inherent, the left always tries to make the argument that when you're talking about race or crime stats, they're like, you think inherently? No. The pretext for affirmative action is inherent because they're saying all people. They're outright saying that if you are Asian, you can't come into this school because you scored this on this test, as if all Asians are the same. So what ends up happening is Latinos and Black Americans will score at a certain level and probably qualify for some good schools, and they'll say, put them in an Ivy League where they struggle, drop out, and are worse off for it.
Well, and it's such a strange thing. If your concern is that there's not enough minority representation in academia, then what you have to do is try to structure things so that they're going through the public school system or whatever private school system is available to them in such a way that they end up being qualified to attend these institutions. You don't slap a Band-Aid over it by pushing them into institutions that they're not qualified to attend.
I think the problem that affirmative action is trying to solve is making up for the last 150 years of the black citizenry of the United States being descended from slaves, not having access to parental education, like their great-great-grandfathers were, slaves and didn't know how to read and write. And then they have kids that if the parent doesn't know how to read and write, education's passed down a lot of times from the adult to the child. So they're trying to solve this, I guess you would call it a class-based issue, because these people were treated as second-class citizens when they were enslaved in 1830. So it's trying to give these people now, like, push them into the level. But I think I agree with what you're saying, that you just can't force people into higher education and expect them to succeed. They need to earn it.
I disagree. I think you're giving too much benefit of the doubt to these people. Since the 50s, when we started seeing the rise of social programs, we've seen what appears to be something beneficial that causes harm. Like Seamus is pointing out, any person who scores low, who is put into an advanced program, will likely struggle with it, and it will cause them harm. I do not believe these people are ignorant of that fact when they have decades of data to show it. I think many of these people are intentionally trying to cause harm because they're overtly racist.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we saw all throughout 2020 that the left wants a race war. They want to inflame division between the races and the classes. And I think it's pretty sick. And I think that affirmative action is one of the most racist policies that we've ever seen. And DEI and race-based hiring is also, in fact, racist. People should be hired and accepted based on merits and not based on ethnicity or color.
2 examples I'll give you, Ian. 1, there's a viral video of 2 white women vandalizing a black neighborhood, and 2 black women come up to them and say, "Stop destroying our neighborhood." And the Antifa liberal women go, no, we're doing this for you. The far leftists would go into minority neighborhoods and assist in the destruction. I was there in Ferguson, and I'm asking myself, why are you people destroying this black neighborhood? There was a leftist who wrote an article after Ferguson in defense of looting and made the argument that they were looting these buildings, that black people were looting buildings because it was resistance to the machine that was oppressing them. The reality, the people who lived in the community linked arms to protect their businesses from outside looters. So why are these people in the media lying over and over again about it? Perhaps it's because they're overt racists who know they're not going to be able to pull off these things if they come out and say, hey, their real plan is to hurt people. They need to act like they're doing good. Don't get me wrong. There probably are a lot of dumb default liberals who think they're doing good. But I think the people organizing this know exactly what they're doing.
Absolutely. And they're attacking the Supreme Court justices as the racists. In reality, the people who support affirmative action are the racists. But it's ridiculous to say that the Supreme Court justices are racist because they were appointed by the least racist president in American history. A report by Reuters just came out, and it said that Donald J. Trump is the only living president who is not a direct descendant of slave owners. So Obama's a direct descendant of slave owners. Joe Biden's a direct descendant of slave owners. Jimmy Carter, the Bushes. Donald Trump appointed the Supreme Court justices who helped overturn Roe v. Wade. Therefore, they are the least racist Supreme Court justices in America, in my opinion, and possibly, in Reuters' opinion as well.
I tell this story. I met this black dude who was anti-Trump, and we were having this discussion. This was in New York, and he said, Donald Trump is the least racist president this country has ever had. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting thing to say. Aren't you against Trump? And he's like, yeah, look, Trump's still racist, but you got to admit he's the least racist president we've ever had. And then I was like, well, elaborate. And he goes, yo, presidents own slaves. And I was like, fair point. So his point was Trump is better than we've ever seen, but there's still work to be done. And I'm kind of like, okay, he was chill about it. I can respect that.
Well, he shared the Reuters report the other day. Trump did.
That was hilarious. I thought it was hilarious. I think it's like obviously a funny way to troll. One thing that I found very entertaining is the reaction from a lot of Democratic politicians with affirmative action being overturned by the court. So Gavin Newsom says they want to whitewash our nation's history. They want to bring America back to the era of book bannings and segregated campuses. We cannot let them. AOC, well, first I'll read you Elizabeth Warren. She said, an extremist Supreme Court has once again reversed decades of settled law. And she goes on to bellow a bit more. And then my personal favorite, AOC, said, if SCOTUS was serious about their ludicrous color blindness claims, they would have abolished legacy admissions, aka affirmative action for the privileged. 70% of Harvard's legacy applicants are white. SCOTUS didn't touch that, which would have impacted them and their patrons. I don't even know where to begin with that. AOC, the court was not deciding on legacy admissions at universities.
Well, Viva Fry makes the good point with the top comment saying 71% of America is white, silly.
Yeah.
So it's actually an underrepresentation at Harvard.
That's also a very good point. But to say, like, well, the Supreme Court didn't touch that. And then also was something no one expected them to touch that wasn't on the table. And then it would have impacted them and their patrons, as if the Supreme Court, that is unelected people, are making these decisions because they're like bought and sold to make this decision. That's why they decided to overturn affirmative action, but didn't say legacy applicants.
What are legacy
allowed.
applicants?
So these are people whose
The children of
parent
alumni.
went to the university. Yeah.
Well, it's important to remember that Elizabeth Warren lied about being Native American to get hired at Harvard, which propelled her to.
You take that back.
That's-
That's not true. She
racist.
is 1,024th Native American, I believe.
Well, of course, she's
So-
defending affirmative action because she gamed the system to get
I know.
a job at Harvard and then become ultimately a U.S. senator. And so,
But what was it? She was actually 1,000th.
1,000th. Yeah, I lied.
Something like
I'm
that,
sorry.
yeah.
Please don't sue me, Elizabeth. You are Native American. 1,024th.
Well, no. Oh, no. But here's what we can say. The Cherokee Nation told her she could not call herself Cherokee because what happened was she got this blood test back that showed that she was a very, very, very tiny fraction Native American. And she said, see, this means I'm Cherokee. That's like saying, well, my DNA test said that I have European blood in me, therefore I'm Italian. What are you talking about? That's
Like
a
an
much
Italian
more
national.
specific claim, right?
But she's she's talking about a tribe.
Yeah, but so she's pointing to a specific tribe and saying, I have indigenous American DNA, therefore I can claim membership in this tribe. That's not how it works.
But it's more than that. It's like saying, I have European ancestry, therefore I'm a British citizen.
Exactly. That's right. Yes.
No,
yes.
no, you're
yes,
not.
Yeah. I'm a British citizen. My DNA test said that I'm 1,000th British, so I guess I'm a citizen now.
I can't
And the
believe
Cherokee Nation was like, no, thank you.
I just can't believe she tried to pull that off.
But if she wants to
Trump
sleep-
trolled her is what happened.
What's hilarious is that Elizabeth Warren is partially responsible for restarting a national conversation about why affirmative action is bad. President Trump started calling her Pocahontas, right? And everybody's like, why is she calling her Pocahontas? And well, she lied about her race and ethnicity to get a job at a school. And there was a CNN interview that I shared this morning. It was from 2017, where an admissions consultant was debating why we need to ban affirmative action. And he predicted in 2017 that President Donald Trump will be the president to end it. He's going to use the Justice Department to sue these schools, which he did. He sued Yale. And then he also said he's going to appoint 3 constitutional conservative justices who will overturn affirmative action. And so that guy on CNN was a prophet. And so, but thank you, Elizabeth Warren, because she also deserves some credit in overturning affirmative action due to being exposed as a liar.
Look at the New York Times wrote. They said, breaking, the Supreme Court rejected affirmative action as Harvard and UNC. The major ruling curtails race-conscious college admissions in the U.S., all but ensuring that elite institutions become whiter and more Asian and less black and Latino.
This is what I want to talk in a minor
Oh,
defense.
my goodness.
Because what I'm going to say might come off as a defense of affirmative action. I used to hate that. When I first learned about it in 1993, we were teenagers in high school, and we'd sit around and talk, be like, wait, if I apply for a job and I have a better score, they're going to hire a black guy that's not as good as me? And they're like, yeah. My friends are like, yeah. We're like, that's reverse racism, which turns out years later we start to realize it's actually just racism. Why don't I get in? But okay, here's the situation. There's 100 of us. We all live on a city block, us. And 100 years ago, super racist. The black people weren't allowed to go to school. They were kept as slaves. So their kids didn't have access to education. They had really crappy food, really small. Their brains didn't develop as much because they had poor nutrition. Now, 30, 40, 50 years later, their kids, same thing. They didn't have a lot of access to food, nutrition. Now it's today, and they're like, we're going to hire the smartest people on the block. Well, it's the people that have ancestrally the best access to nutrition and education that are going to be considered the best at. And so naturally, the people with the healthiest ancestors are going to get the crack at it. And what they're trying to do is to balance it out. So like, sorry, your ancestors didn't have access to education.
But that's like the fairy tale version of what they're doing, which is not what they're doing.
They're hitting it with a mallet. It's not working.
The way you solve this is class-based. So what's actually happening is you have impoverished, we'll use Chicago as an example. You have impoverished areas with a higher density of black people. What the left does is they look at the neighborhood, see black people, and then think the race is the reason, which is racist. They then start saying insanely racist things. But there's also Latino, Eastern European immigrants, white people living in these areas as well. So here's what ends up happening. Because the people who can only see race, who are racist and have always been racist, think the solution to the problem is more racism, they go into a neighborhood that may be 70% black and 20% white, and they say, all of the black people here are going to get a special benefit so that we can put them in better institutions. And then their neighbors, their equals and their peers who are not black or who are, Latino or white or whatever, are sitting there holding empty bags saying, what about us? Then what happens when you have people of different racial backgrounds and the state comes in and gives money literally to one racial group? In these areas, I'll tell you what happens. The racial group that doesn't get the benefit, they keep engaging in the crime they typically engage in, but they target the people with money. So you end up with other people being like, hey, this race is attacking this race. All it does is make racial tensions worse. The real solution is, in your analogy, 100 people living on a block, 80% or 80 of them are working at the best institutions and are wealthy. And they say, we want to make sure everyone's got an equal opportunity. What do? I know those of a certain income bracket. Then they walk into the portion of their street where it's a higher density of black and Latino for historic reasons. And they say to everyone there, including the poor white people, the poor immigrants, the poor Latinos, the poor Asians, doesn't matter what your race is. We're here to help all of you.
So would it be, I think it would still be a bad idea if Harvard were to let people in that were poor at a higher rate with the same test scores. Maybe not.
No, it's about letting people in who are poor with the appropriate test scores, but waiving certain fees and giving them scholarships. The idea is, if you should be here, we're going to make sure you can be here. Just because you're poor doesn't mean you deserve to go to Harvard. But if we want to help break the cycle of poverty, we find the diamond in the rough in these areas and we say, you have real potential and the only thing holding you back is that your parents don't have the money. We're going to cover those costs for you. That's how you actually solve these problems. And if the left actually believed what they believed about historical racism and institutional racism, that policy right there would disproportionately help black and Latino individuals. You would not need affirmative action. So I can only conclude either they're stupid or they're lying. And the reality may be a mixture of both.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'll also add this. Part of what affirmative action does is it recenters our thinking about the purpose of having a career, the purpose of going through an academic institution, the purpose of being admitted to a college. Right? The reason that society sanctions these things, the reason society gives a person the position of privilege and esteem that it is to be a student at one of these universities is because they believe that that student is going to be able to contribute. And the reason they have good evidence to believe that that student's going to have something to contribute at the level that they're being given that honor is because of their test scores, because of their academic history, these things. The purpose of social positions is not to make the person in the social position feel special for having the social position. The purpose of a social position is to find what we can get from other people.
What's a social position in this?
Just like, anything, a job, a position as a student, right? With anything, anything that society carves out and says, this is what this person does. We're either going to hire you if we're an employer, or we're going to elect you if you're someone running for office, or we are going to give you this seat at our university if we're admitting you. The whole purpose of it is, this is somebody who, if we give this position to, will be able to contribute to society in a way such that it'll make it better. Not, let's give this person this position so they can feel special.
Here's the other thing. Imagine there was a neighborhood that was lower income. And these leftists are like, these poor people, they should go to college. Okay, for what? Go to college for what?
Yeah.
What job or career or plan? So they go into this poor area and they say, we want to give you guys college. And the poor guy says, this area is working class, industrial, factory. We're some of the best in these areas. The amount of money generated from these factories is lower than the Ivy League areas. That doesn't, just because they may make less money doesn't mean everyone should just be in college. Some like, what we want to do is we want to maximize people's talents and abilities. We want to make sure that everybody's getting their best opportunity. So if someone is from a neighborhood that typically is working class, but they clearly show an affinity for the law, we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to reach that. The left just says, we want more people of race to be in institution, which just makes no sense.
So what they're really saying is we want less white kids and less Asian kids at these institutions.
Well, it's the Asian thing for the most part. I've talked to leftists about this quite a bit, and I always end by saying, after they agree with all of this, all right, fine. have it your way, but you have to be the one to look the poor Asian kid in the eyes and say, I'm sorry, kid. You don't get to go to college because you look too much like that guy.
Yeah.
That's their argument. Well, I'm sorry, that little kid looks like that little kid. Therefore, only one of them gets to go to college.
Well,
How does that make sense?
I was talking to a friend of mine who he's a white guy who's married to a Mexican woman, and they have a son together. And he was looking for private schools in New York City. And his son's complexion looks more like his white father's than it does his Mexican mom's. And they said, actually, you don't look the part. Like, we can't support you financially and give you some breaks because you don't look the right color. And so even though he's half Hispanic, which would technically qualify him, but he doesn't look Hispanic, he doesn't get a lower rate for tuition as the Hispanic kids. And so, it's just like, people are getting fed up with this. I think the affirmative action being overturned is going to be incredibly popular with the American public. I think a lot of parents, a lot of white parents, a lot of Asian parents, they've kind of held their tongue because they don't want to be called racist by their woke liberal friends. But these college campuses are turning into hellholes as well. I had a family member who graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I went to the graduation in May. And some student on campus, just from random student, got caught using the N-word. It was a white girl who used the N-word. So 10 minutes out of the graduation, 2 black girls got up on stage, welcomed by the dean, and these students lectured about how racist the University of Wisconsin-Madison is and how much progress they still need to make. And so these girls are lecturing the entire graduating class and the 50,000 parents and family members that are in attendance about how racist the community is and how much the University of Wisconsin sucks. And they just let it happen. I'm like, what the hell is going on in these places?
Yeah, well, there's a kind of self-flagellation that every left-wing institution has to partake in. We're so racist, we're so horrible, we're so sorry, that type of thing. I mean, they almost feel as if it's a kind of, and I shouldn't say they almost feel this way, it is. I mean, it's just a virtue signal.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.